Celebration 5 already has something for sale. Vader's Secret Apprentice is back for thirds. Star Wars in Concert wraps up stateside. It's December 17th, and you'll be hearing about those stories and more this week in Star Wars. This Week in Star Wars is your source for new and noteworthy developments in the world of Star Wars. I'm your host, Matt Fox. And now, this week's lead stories. Only a week after being formally announced, tickets for Star Wars Celebration 5 are available for sale. StarWarsCelebration.com made 4-day and individual day passes available for purchase on December 10th. Prices vary, with the upper limit adult 4-day pass checking in at $120. Ticket buyers are also offered the opportunity to purchase a Star Wars Celebration program as well. The official convention site also promises VIP tickets will be sold at a later date, but early adopters will be given the opportunity to upgrade at that time. The site provides no information as to what a VIP pass will get you, perhaps admission to the Emperor's Club, or if there will be any exclusive benefits for hyperspace members as there have been at past celebrations. No word yet on whether advance ticket sales are limited or when those passes will ship. However, procrastinators who wait until after July 11th, 2010 will have to wait to collect those tickets at the show. Star Wars Celebration 5 will be held August 12th through 15th at the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando, Florida. Also announced this week was the next installment in the LucasArts Star Wars video game collection. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 will be released at an undetermined date in 2010, according to LucasArts.com. Gamers will be able to reprise their role as Galen Marek, aka Darth Vader's secret apprentice, and inspiration to the founders of the Rebellion. Few additional details are available at this time about the game, which was unveiled on Spike TV's Video Game Awards, but a cursory viewing of the trailer, available at Unleashed2010.com, indicates that the protagonist of the original game was not quite as dead or rebuilt as we were led to believe. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 is, as one may have already suspected, the sequel to 2008's The Force Unleashed, which, according to USAtoday.com, sold over 1.5 million units in its first week of release, on its way to becoming the best-selling Star Wars video game title of all time. If you live in the United States and you wanted to see Star Wars in concert, then I'm afraid you may be out of luck, at least unless you have travel plans abroad. StarWarsInConcert.com reports that the North American leg of the live multimedia show wrapped in Nashville, Tennessee on December 13th. The tour, which features an orchestra playing live selections from the various Star Wars soundtracks to the accompaniment of HD footage from all the films and is hosted by C-3PO's Anthony Daniels himself, will resume in Ireland in March 2010 for a European leg. Unless additional U.S. dates are announced, American fans will have to wait for the as-yet unannounced but inevitable DVD Blu-ray release sometime down the road to hear live versions of music they know by heart and catch glimpses of the new CGI Yoda inserted into Episode 1 footage. Those are the headlines. Here's this week's collecting news.
Me? I'm a collecting fool.
The holiday season is in full swing with almost constant sales at all the major retailers. If you can brave the crowds of parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles buying anything and everything with abandon, deals can be found, even if new product is a bit thin on the ground. Various collecting sites are reporting sporadic sightings of all waves of Hasbro figures, up to and including the Empire Strikes Back wave. Likewise, as seems to happen each year about this time, next year's LEGO sets are showing up at most Toys R Us's already. Topps is going to the well once again. According to Topps.com, Star Wars Galaxy Series 5 will be released in February 2010. Featuring artistic renderings of characters and scenes from the Star Wars universe, this set will feature a 120-card base set with several subsets, hobby and retail exclusives, autographs, and the now obligatory artist sketch cards. Check your local card dealers and wholesalers for prices and availability. The announcement of Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 was met with some groans by those gamers who were hoping for the announcement of a different sequel, Star Wars Battlefront 3. Fear not, says StarWarsBattlefront3.net. According to that site, a voice actor claiming to be involved in the game has made it known that work is progressing on the title despite no official word from LucasArts and the closure of developer Free Radical. Take this report for what it's worth, but those that still yearn to see the first-person shooter series brought to the current generation of platforms will no doubt take whatever reassurance they can get. In publishing news this week, Darth Bane, Dynasty of Evil has hit stores. The third novel about the fan-favorite Sith set 1,000 years before A New Hope is available in hardback from most, if not all, major book resellers.
This book is devastating.
As with the prior two Darth Bane novels, Dynasty of Evil is authored by Drew Karpyshyn and tells the ongoing story of the Sith who created the Rule of Two that viewers of the Star Wars movies are so familiar with. This week's singular comic offering from Dark Horse is the Thrawn Trilogy hardcover collection. This edition collects all three comic adaptations of Timothy Zahn's Thrawn Trilogy in one fancy volume. Scheduled for publication next week are Knights of the Old Republic 48, Legacy 43, and Clone Wars Adventures No. 4. The second Family Guy Star Wars parody, entitled Something 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 Dark Side, is going to be available a week earlier than originally expected. The animated parody of Empire Strikes Back will now be available on December 22nd, and fans of the Griffin family should update those holiday wish lists as soon as possible. Our last item this week comes from the UK's timesonline.co.uk and tells us that stormtroopers are not art. So says the British Court of Appeal, at least. Lucasfilm's efforts to stop one Mr. Andrew Ainsworth from manufacturing and selling replica stormtrooper helmets was dealt a setback this week when the court determined that Mr. Ainsworth, who was involved in the design and manufacture of the original stormtrooper helmet props from the 1977 movie, was not violating Britain's copyright law. Using the same machinery that he used for the original props, Mr. Ainsworth began offering replica helmets for sale in 2004 and was quickly set upon by the plaid-clad filmmaker's attorneys, or more precisely his barristers. However, the court determined that the helmets are more utilitarian than artistic, and thus not subject to protection under the law. Really, though, how utilitarian can they be, since we all know that you can't see a thing out of them? They're useless at stopping blaster bolts, and they prevent the wearer from seeing low ceilings. Lucasfilm representatives say that they will appeal the decision to Britain's newly established Supreme Court. And now, a little bit about what this show is. If you're listening to This Week in Star Wars for the first time, there's a reason for it. This is the first episode. As the title of the podcast indicates, this will be a weekly show dedicated to what is happening in the Star Wars world. I will try to keep the focus broad, the news straight, and the show entertaining. This is my first attempt at a podcast, and I hope it gets easier and better each week. They say that brevity is the soul of wit, and I think it is also the soul of a good news podcast. I won't waste 20 minutes of your time when 10 will do. As you have already heard today, I view this show as the podcast equivalent of a newspaper, with the sections devoted to news, collecting, gaming, publishing, and the amorphous other. I will also indulge myself each week with a brief commentary about whatever aspects of the Lucas creation is on my mind. But that will be brief, and I'll also try to make it entertaining or at least thought-provoking. Lastly, I'd like to say a little bit about me so you can understand where I'm coming from and the perspective that I bring to this show. At the age of 6, in 1977, my parents literally made me go see the original Star Wars film. I think that was a decision that they probably regretted almost immediately. Like so many of my peers, Star Wars became a central part of my childhood existence. It was easy to let Star Wars go in the late 80s when I was in high school and college, and Lucas seemed to put the whole project on hiatus. But letting go then made it all the sweeter when in the mid-1990s the Star Wars resurgence began. I enjoy all the films, even the prequels. I enjoy the Clone Wars TV show. I read some of the books and play some of the games. I am a collector, but this will not be a collecting podcast. I attended Celebrations 2, 3, and 4 and plan to attend Celebration 5. In short, I consider myself a Star Wars fan without a focus. I will praise what is praiseworthy, and I will criticize, but not simply for the sake of criticism. Additionally, I will note that, at least at its inception, this podcast has no sponsors. I will not promise that will always be the case, but I will promise that I will never allow a sponsorship to influence directly or indirectly the news or information that I present here. While I may at times make reference to a specific vendor, retailer, product, or manufacturer, I do so only when I believe it is noteworthy. You will see, eventually, links to retail sites on thisweekinstarwars.com. I feel obliged to mention that the show will be rewarded for any purchases made by customers who use those links, and as such, I encourage you to do so. Any income generated from those links will be used to improve the quality of this show and nothing else. Finally, I want to thank you for downloading this show, and if you like what you heard, please encourage your friends to listen as well. I welcome your comments and suggestions at any time. And that was This Week in Star Wars. Join us again next week for more news, notes, and developments from the galaxy far, far away. And if you have a news item or a question or comment about the show, we look forward to hearing from you at news@thisweekinstarwars.com. Visit www.thisweekinstarwars.com, or for our lazier listeners, www.twisw.com, where you can find links and more details about the stories mentioned in today's show. I'm Matt Fox, and you've been listening to This Week in Star Wars. We prowl the web so you don't have to. This Week in Star Wars is not affiliated with Lucasfilm, any of its subsidiaries, or other entity mentioned in this podcast. Star Wars, its characters and creations, are the property of Lucasfilm. All other trademarks are property of their respective trademark owners. This Week in Star Wars is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. More information, links to the stories presented, and past episodes and contact information are available at www.thisweekinstarwars.com.
This show is terrible, and I'm really happy.